The ABC News studio falls silent as Karoline Leavitt rises from her chair, staring directly at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez across the table. "Congresswoman, you just spent 2 minutes attacking my credentials and calling me inexperienced," Leavitt says, her voice calm but determined. "Now let me show America what real experience looks like." Leavitt opens a folder and pulls out a document that makes AOC's eyes widen. "This is the fiscal impact report on your Green New Deal," Leavitt continues. "The one you told Americans wouldn't raise their taxes. Page 17 shows your own economists admitting it would cost the average family $4,500 more per year." The camera catches AOC's stunned expression as she realizes Leavitt has brought receipts. That's taken out of context," AOC stammers. But the damage is done. The moderator leans forward, suddenly interested, as the audience murmurs. Leavitt smiles slightly. "Context is exactly what America's been missing, Congresswoman. The political discussion show has just transformed into the most unexpected confrontation of the year. This showdown between AOC and Karoline Leavitt is just getting started. Hit like and subscribe to see how this explosive exchange unfolds." Just minutes earlier, this Sunday morning political panel seemed routine. The ABC News Policy Perspectives Roundtable featured 4 guests discussing climate legislation. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, former Trump spokesperson Karoline Leavitt, economist Dr. James Wilson, and journalist Maria Sanchez. The studio lights illuminated the polished wood table where the 4 panelists sat, arranged for maximum visual contrast. Moderator David Cohen had introduced the segment as a discussion on balancing climate action with economic realities, a topic guaranteed to generate friction between the progressive congresswoman and the conservative commentator. The ABC studio was packed with an audience clearly divided in their political leanings. Many younger viewers wore Green New Deal Now pins, while others sported America First caps. Network executives had deliberately selected a mixed audience, knowing controversial topics drive ratings higher. Several cameras were positioned strategically around the studio to capture reactions from both panelists and audience members. AOC had become a progressive icon since her surprising 2018 election victory. At 33, her social media savvy and passionate advocacy for climate action had earned her millions of followers and regular media appearances. Her Green New Deal proposal had dominated climate policy discussions for years, positioning her as the face of progressive climate action in Congress. The Congresswoman arrived at the studio that morning with her signature confidence, greeting supporters and taking selfies with fans before the broadcast. She'd appeared on dozens of similar panels and had earned a reputation for effectively communicating progressive policies to mainstream audiences. Her team had provided her with talking points about the economic benefits of climate action, focusing on job creation and long-term savings. Karoline Leavitt, though less nationally known, had built a rapid political career of her own. After serving as a Trump White House assistant press secretary at just 23, she ran for Congress in New Hampshire at 25. Though she lost that race, she had since become a rising conservative voice on economic and energy policy, appearing regularly on right-leaning news programs. What few people knew was how meticulously Leavitt had prepared for this appearance. For 3 weeks, she had studied every aspect of the Green New Deal, reading not just the public summaries, but the detailed economic analyses buried in appendices and supplementary reports. She had highlighted discrepancies between public messaging and internal projections, creating a binder of evidence most commentators never bothered to compile. Leavitt had arrived at the studio early, reviewing her notes one final time. She anticipated AOC would dismiss her credentials rather than engage with her policy critiques, a common tactic used against younger conservative commentators. Instead of preparing emotional responses, she had focused on gathering concrete evidence that couldn't easily be dismissed. The roundtable also featured two less partisan voices. Dr. James Wilson, a respected economist from MIT, had published extensively on climate economics and was known for his measured, data-driven approach. Maria Sanchez, an environmental journalist with The Atlantic, had spent years covering the intersection of climate policy and public opinion. The discussion began cordially enough, with each panelist outlining their general position on climate legislation. Dr. Wilson emphasized the importance of market mechanisms, while journalist Sanchez discussed public opinion trends, showing growing concern about climate impacts. The tension emerged when moderator Cohen asked specifically about the economic impact of climate legislation. Americans are struggling with inflation and high costs, Leavitt began. Any climate policy must consider the financial impact on working families. We need solutions that don't force people to choose between environmental progress and putting food on the table. The AOC shook her head visibly during Leavitt's response. When Cohen turned to her, the Congresswoman didn't hide her disagreement. "That's the same tired talking point we always hear from climate deniers," AOC said dismissively. "The cost of inaction far exceeds the cost of addressing climate change. Every economic analysis shows the Green New Deal would create jobs and save Americans money in the long run." "I'm not denying climate change," Leavitt responded. "I'm talking about realistic solutions versus untested theories. There's a difference between acknowledging a problem and supporting policies that would devastate working families economically." AOC's response took the conversation in an unexpectedly personal direction. "With respect, Miss Leavitt," she said, with a tone that suggested little actual respect, "those of us who have actually legislated on these issues understand their complexity. You worked briefly in a press office and lost your only election. Perhaps gain some policy experience before lecturing about realistic solutions." The studio tensed at the direct attack. Several audience members exchanged glances. Cohen, sensing ratings gold, leaned in. "Ms. Leavitt, would you like to respond to the Congresswoman's characterization of your experience?" That's when Leavitt stood up and reached for the folder that would change everything. "Thank you for the opportunity to respond," Leavitt begins, standing confidently. "Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez suggests I lack the experience to discuss climate policy economics." She opens her folder methodically. "Before joining the White House, I graduated with honors in political science and economics. But let's focus on policy substance rather than credentials." Leavitt pulls out a document with the congressional letterhead. "This is the fiscal impact analysis of the Green New Deal that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez sponsored." She places it on the table where cameras can clearly capture it. The Congresswoman has repeatedly told Americans her plan wouldn't burden working families. Yet on page 17, her own economic advisors acknowledge a cost increase of approximately $4,500 annually for median-income households. The camera catches AOC shifting uncomfortably as Leavitt continues. Furthermore, page 23 projects job losses of 840,000 in manufacturing and energy sectors, primarily in working-class communities. These aren't my numbers or Republican numbers. These are from the Congresswoman's own policy team. A murmur spreads through the studio audience. Several people lean forward in their seats, suddenly more engaged than they had been during the previous talking points. AOC interrupts. "Those numbers don't account for new jobs in green industries." "I'm getting to that," Leavitt responds calmly. Page 24 acknowledges most new jobs would require retraining and relocation, with approximately 78% of displaced workers unlikely to find equivalent employment within their communities. She flips to another highlighted section. The report specifically notes that most new green jobs would be created in urban tech hubs, not in the rural and industrial communities facing the greatest job losses. Leavitt turns to face AOC directly. Congresswoman, you've called me inexperienced, but I've actually read your legislation and its supporting analysis. Have you? The audience reacts audibly. Several people whisper to each other. Even some wearing Green New Deal pins look concerned. Cohen attempts to regain control. Let's keep this civil. I'm being perfectly civil, Leavitt responds. I'm simply discussing the Congresswoman's own policy documents, the ones not featured in her social media posts. AOC recovers. Those projections are worst-case scenarios, not expected outcomes, and they're offset by healthcare savings and… I have those projections too, Leavitt interrupts, pulling out another document. Your own analysts estimate healthcare savings would offset approximately 22% of increased costs, leaving families still paying thousands more annually. She turns to a specific page. The report acknowledges that most healthcare savings would not materialize until 5 to 7 years into implementation, while cost increases would begin immediately. Dr. Wilson, the economist panelist who had been silent, interjects. Ms. Leavitt's numbers are consistent with most mainstream economic analyses of comprehensive climate legislation. The transition costs are significant in early implementation years, even if long-term benefits eventually outweigh them. The camera catches audience members nodding along with the expert validation. Cohen turns to AOC. Congresswoman, how do you respond to these specific figures from your own policy team? AOC appears momentarily flustered. These are complex projections with numerous variables. Cherry-picking numbers without context is misleading. Then let me provide context, Leavitt responds, producing more documents. These are statements from your own public appearances. She reads directly. The Green New Deal won't cost American families more. CNN Town Hall, March 2023. Working families will save money under our plan. MSNBC, April 2023. Anyone claiming this will raise costs for average Americans is lying. Your Twitter account, May 2023. The camera focuses on these quotes displayed on screen as Leavitt continues. There are 14 more examples here, she says, holding up several pages of similar quotes. In none of them do you mention the $4,500 annual cost increase your own economists projected. In none of them do you acknowledge the 7-year gap before benefits might offset costs. Leavitt looks up from the quotes. Congresswoman, do you stand by these statements in light of your own team's analysis? The camera captures AOC's expression, a mixture of surprise and growing frustration. She clearly didn't expect this level of detailed preparation from someone she had dismissed as inexperienced. Those statements reflect the long-term benefits once the transition is complete, AOC argues. Initial costs are necessary investments. So you acknowledge there are significant costs to families, Leavitt presses. Costs you've publicly denied repeatedly? AOC's frustration becomes visible. Climate change itself will cost far more if we do nothing. I agree completely, Leavitt responds, surprising everyone. Climate change requires serious action, but it also requires honest conversation about costs, not dismissing legitimate economic concerns as tired talking points while hiding the real numbers from voters. She produces another document. Your own policy advisors recommended a transparent communication strategy about transition costs. In this memo, dated January 2023, they wrote, "We must prepare Americans for short-term economic adjustments while emphasizing long-term benefits." Leavitt holds up the memo. Yet your public messaging has consistently denied any costs at all. Why ignore your own experts' advice about transparency? The studio audience, initially more favorable to AOC, now watches with shifted attention as Leavitt continues. Americans deserve transparent climate policies with clear-eyed economic analysis, not policies where the true costs are buried in appendices, while leaders claim there won't be any sacrifice required. Dr. Wilson nods visibly, Policy transparency is certainly essential for public trust. Most Americans support climate action but want honest assessments of transition impacts. Journalist Maria Sanchez adds, "My reporting consistently shows that voters feel misled when costs emerge that weren't initially disclosed. Trust in climate initiatives actually decreases when people feel blindsided by unexpected expenses." Cohen senses the momentum shift. Congresswoman, would you like to address the apparent discrepancy between your public statements and these internal projections? AOC visibly collects herself, recognizing the need to counter Leavitt's unexpected preparation. First, I appreciate Ms. Leavitt actually engaging with policy details rather than typical talking points. AOC begins strategically. But these documents reflect preliminary analysis, not final projections. Leavitt immediately responds, "This analysis is dated 3 weeks after your last public denial of any cost increases. It's the most current official analysis available." She holds up the document's cover page showing the date. If there's a newer analysis showing different numbers, I'd genuinely be interested in seeing it. The camera captures the exact moment AOC realizes she can't easily dismiss these documents. The transition to clean energy involves complex economic shifts, AOC continues. Initial investments may create short-term costs while generating long-term savings and preventing catastrophic climate expenses. Then why not say that honestly? Leavitt asks, her voice calm but insistent. Instead of telling Americans there would be no costs. She turns to address the audience directly. I actually agree with the Congresswoman that climate action is necessary. My concern isn't about whether we should act on climate change. It's about honest communication with Americans about what that action will require. Several audience members nod in agreement, including some wearing Green New Deal pins. Dr. Wilson interjects again. From an economic perspective, transparency about transition costs is essential for effective policy implementation. Most Americans understand investment principles, but dislike being misled about initial expenses. He turns to AOC. The public generally accepts short-term sacrifices for long-term gains, if they're prepared for them. But surprise costs undermine trust in the entire policy framework. The journalist on the panel, Maria Sanchez, adds, "Public trust in climate initiatives depends on honest communication about both benefits and costs. My reporting shows voters respond better to transparent assessments than to promises that later prove incomplete." She references specific polling data. In fact, support for climate action increases by 12% when policies include clear transition plans that acknowledge costs while emphasizing benefits. AOC attempts to regain control. My statements reflected the net benefit after considering all factors. With respect, Congresswoman, Leavitt interrupts, your own analysis doesn't support that claim. Even with all benefits calculated, the average family still faces thousands in additional costs annually for at least the first 7 years. She holds up another document. This is the Green New Deal's own timeline showing when economic benefits might begin offsetting costs. Your public statements contradict your own policy teams annually. The audience murmurs as Leavitt continues. Americans support climate action. Polls consistently show that. But they deserve honest conversation about costs and benefits, not being told there won't be any sacrifice while internal documents say otherwise. Leavitt references a specific report. The University of Chicago Energy Policy Institute found that support for climate initiatives drops by 20% when voters discover costs that weren't initially disclosed. That damages the very cause you're advocating for. AOC, recognizing she's losing ground, shifts tactics. The fossil fuel industry has hidden the true cost of their pollution for decades. That's the real dishonesty we should discuss. I agree completely, Leavitt responds. surprising AOC again. Corporate pollution externalities should be accounted for, but that doesn't justify misleading the public about the costs of proposed solutions. She turns to face the audience directly. Climate policy isn't about scoring political points. It's about finding solutions Americans can actually support because they understand both the costs and benefits. Leavitt pulls out one final document. The most effective climate communication strategy, according to your own advisors, is acknowledge costs up front while emphasizing greater long-term benefits. Why not follow that approach? The camera catches AOC's expression, a mixture of frustration and grudging respect as she realizes Leavitt has thoroughly prepared for this encounter. Several audience members are now openly nodding at Leavitt's points. The studio dynamic has clearly shifted from the beginning of the segment. Cohen turns to AOC. Congresswoman, given these documents, would you reconsider how you've communicated the economic impact of your proposals? It's the moment of truth. The studio holds its breath. Look, AOC finally says. Perhaps our messaging has emphasized benefits over transition costs. That's fair criticism. But the urgency of climate action remains. It's a small but significant concession, one the audience clearly notices. Leavitt nods respectfully. The urgency is exactly why honest conversation matters. Americans will accept necessary sacrifices if they're not blindsided by hidden costs. Climate policy is too important for anything less than complete transparency. The audience applauds, recognizing the surprising moment of substantive debate that has unfolded. What began as AOC dismissing Leavitt has transformed into Leavitt demonstrating unexpected policy depth and forcing a rare concession from the progressive congresswoman. Cohen, recognizing the powerful television moment, announces a break. When we return, we'll continue this remarkable discussion about climate policy transparency. As cameras cut away, AOC can be seen leaning over to Leavitt, exchanging words that viewers can't hear, but that seem to reflect a newfound, if reluctant, professional respect. As the ABC News panel returns from commercial break, the dynamic has visibly shifted. AOC and Leavitt now engage each other directly, with a more substantive tone than the personal attacks that started the segment. While we disagree on policy specifics, AOC acknowledges, Ms. Leavitt raises fair points about economic transparency. It's a small concession that speaks volumes to viewers. Leavitt responds with equal professionalism, and the Congresswoman's commitment to addressing climate change is genuine and necessary. The remaining discussion focuses on finding common ground, the need for regional economic support during energy transitions, transparent cost analysis, and infrastructure investment. Dr. Wilson suggests a bipartisan approach. Perhaps legislation could include stronger transitional support for communities facing job displacement, while maintaining honest cost projections. Sanchez adds that her reporting shows Americans respond well to clear transition timelines that acknowledge both short-term challenges and long-term benefits. When the show ends, clips of the exchange immediately flood social media. Within hours, Leavitt receipts and policy transparency trend nationwide. Watch Karoline Leavitt come prepared with the receipts AOC wasn't expecting. Reads one viral tweet with over 80,000 likes in the first hour. When dismissing your opponent backfires spectacularly, proclaims another, showing side-by-side images of AOC's initial dismissal and later concession. TikTok users create dozens of reaction videos, many featuring the moment Leavitt revealed the internal documents. One creator's video, titled "How to Respond When Someone Underestimates You," garners over 2 million views by evening. News coverage reflects the unexpected confrontation. Preparation meets perception. How Karoline Leavitt changed the climate. Conversation. Washington Post. AOC challenged on Green New Deal costs in surprising Sunday showdown. Politico. Policy receipts. Leavitt forces rare concession in climate debate. The Hill. Experience versus evidence. The ABC exchange that's changing political discussion. Bloomberg. Even progressive outlets acknowledge the moment. AOC faces legitimate challenge on climate messaging transparency, writes Vox, noting that preparation trumped perception in the viral exchange. The article continues. While the Green New Deal's long-term benefits remain sound, the confrontation raises valid questions about how progressives communicate transition costs to the public. By evening, both CNN and Fox News feature panels discussing the confrontation, though with predictably different framing. Conservative commentators celebrate Leavitt's preparation, while progressive voices acknowledge the need for more transparent economic communication around climate policies. What we witnessed wasn't just good television, says one CNN analyst. It was a masterclass in how preparation can level the playing field against better-known opponents. On Fox News, a commentator notes, Leavitt didn't win by attacking AOC personally. She won by knowing the policy details better than the policy's own author. The impact extends beyond media coverage. Within 48 hours, a bipartisan group in Congress announces a Climate Policy Transparency Act, requiring clear economic impact statements on all major environmental legislation. Senator Mark Warner, one of the bill's sponsors, directly references the exchange. As we saw in Sunday's discussion, Americans deserve honest assessments of both costs and benefits when considering major policy changes. 3 climate advocacy organizations update their websites to include more detailed economic transition information, acknowledging that transparency builds stronger public support. The Sierra Club issues a statement. While climate action remains urgent, we recognize the importance of transparent communication about transition impacts and costs. Our updated resources reflect this commitment to honesty in advocacy. For Leavitt, the aftermath transforms her political standing. Interview requests flood in from major networks. Her social media followers triple in a week. Political analysts begin mentioning her as a serious contender for future offices. What Leavitt demonstrated wasn't just policy knowledge, writes one political strategist, but the rare ability to challenge a political star without resorting to personal attacks, focusing instead on substantive policy details. When asked about the exchange in a follow-up interview, Leavitt remains focused on substance. This wasn't about embarrassing anyone. It was about honest policy discussion. Americans deserve clear information about both the costs and benefits of major legislation. She emphasizes her support for climate action while maintaining her critique of communication strategies. We can address climate change while being truthful about what that will require from all Americans. AOC, known for her social media savvy, addresses the moment in an Instagram live session. I respect when someone comes prepared with substantive points, even when we disagree. The climate conversation should be about honest policy debate, not personal attacks, and I acknowledge my approach initially wasn't helpful. Her candid acknowledgement earns respect, even from critics, showing a political maturity that surprises many observers. Sometimes being a leader means acknowledging when valid criticism emerges, she tells her followers. The climate movement is stronger when we're honest about challenges as well as opportunities. A month later, when both women appear on separate Sunday shows, hosts inevitably ask about the confrontation. Both have clearly moved forward with lessons learned. Policy disagreements shouldn't be personal, Leavitt notes. What matters is honest debate about real impacts on American families. AOC similarly reflects the climate movement is stronger when we're transparent about both costs and benefits. Americans can handle the truth if we present it clearly. The confrontation's most significant legacy emerges in subsequent climate hearings, where lawmakers from both parties now routinely ask more detailed questions about economic transition costs and timelines. Pulling a Leavitt becomes Capitol Hill shorthand for coming to hearings with unexpectedly thorough preparation. Climate policy discussions across the country show subtle but important shifts. Advocates increasingly acknowledge transition costs while emphasizing long-term benefits. Public support for climate initiatives actually increases as a result of this more honest approach. A political science professor at Georgetown uses the exchange in her classes on effective political communication. What makes this confrontation so valuable as a teaching tool is how it demonstrates the power of evidence over rhetoric, she explains. It changed the climate conversation not by attacking the policy itself, but by focusing on the importance of honest communication. For everyday Americans, the exchange offers a rare glimpse of what political discourse could be: substantive, prepared, and focused on policy details rather than personalities. In classrooms and community meetings, the clip becomes a case study in effective political communication and the importance of thorough research. 6 months later, when both women find themselves on the same panel again, viewers tune in expecting fireworks. Instead, they witness something more valuable: a substantive debate between prepared opponents who disagree strongly but engage each other's actual positions rather than caricatures. The lesson resonates beyond politics. Preparation defeats perception. Evidence changes conversations. And sometimes, the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply to be thoroughly prepared. Don't miss our next breakdown of Washington's most explosive confrontations. Hit subscribe now and turn on notifications to stay updated on these jaw-dropping political moments. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on this showdown. Was Leavitt's comeback the most effective response to being underestimated you've ever seen? Like this video if you believe thorough preparation beats political stardom.